Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Today is story time. Yes, it's the story time video. And we are still reading from Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. And we left off in the middle of chapter 16. I'm going to do a bit of a recap. Mrs. March received a telegram stating that Mr. March was sick. So the girls had helped her get prepared, and now she's on her way. And this is where we left off. How kind everyone is to us, she said, turning to find fresh proof of it in the respectful sympathy of the young man's face. I don't see how they can help it, returned Mr. Brooke, laughing so infectiously that Mrs. March could not help smiling. And so the journey began, with the good omens of sunshine, smiles, and cheerful words. I feel as if there had been an earthquake, said Joe, as their neighbors went home to breakfast, leaving them to rest and refresh themselves. It seems as if half the house was gone, added Meg forlornly. Beth opened her eyes to say something, but could only point to the pile of nicely mended hose which lay on Mother's table, showing that even in her last hurried moments she had thought and worked for them. It was a little thing, but it went straight to their hearts, and in spite of their brave resolutions, they all broke down and cried bitterly. Hannah wisely allowed them to relieve their feelings when the shower showed signs of clearing up. She came to the rescue, armed with a coffee pot. Now, my dear young ladies, remember what your ma said, and don't fret. Come and have a cup of coffee all around, and then let's fall to work and be a credit to the family. Coffee was a treat, and Hannah showed great tact in making it that morning. No one could resist her persuasive nods or the fragrant invitation issuing from the nose of the coffee pot. They drew up to the table, exchanged their handkerchiefs for napkins, and in 10 minutes were all right again. Hope and keep busy. That's the motto for us. So let's see who will remember it best. I shall go to Aunt March as usual. Oh, won't she lecture those, said Jo, as she sipped with returning spirit. I shall go to my King's, though I'd much rather stay at home and attend to things here, said Meg, wishing she hadn't made her eyes so red. No need of that. Beth and I can keep house perfectly well, put in Amy with an important air. Hannah will tell us what to do, and we'll have everything nice when you come home, added Beth, getting out her mop and dish tub without delay. I think anxiety is very interesting, added Amy, eating sugar pensively. The girls couldn't help laughing, and felt better for it, though Meg shook her head at the young lady who could find consolation in a sugar bowl. The sight of the turnovers made Jo sober again. When the two went out to their daily tasks, they looked sorrowfully back at the window where they were accustomed to seeing their mother's face. It was gone, but Beth had remembered the little household ceremony, and there she was, nodding away at them like a rosy-faced mandarin. That's so like my Beth, said Jo, waving her hat with a grateful face. Excuse me. Goodbye, Maggie. I hope the Kings won't strain today. Don't fret about father, dear, she added as they parted. And I hope Aunt March won't croak. Your hair is becoming, and it looks very boyish and nice, returned Meg, trying not to smile at the curly head, which looked comically small on her tall sister's shoulders. That's my only comfort. And touching her hat a la Laurie, away went Jo, feeling like a shorn sheep on a wintry day. News from their father comforted the girls very much, for although dangerously ill, the presence of the best and tenderest of nurses had already done him good. Mr. Brooke sent a bulletin every day, and as the head of the family, Meg insisted on reading the dispatches, which grew more cheerful as the week passed. At first, everyone was eager to write, and plump envelopes were carefully poked into the letter box by one or the other of the sisters, who felt rather important with their Washington correspondence. As one of these packets contained characteristic notes from the party, we will rob an imaginary mail and read them. My dearest mother, it is impossible to tell you how happy your last letter made us. for the news was so good we couldn't help laughing and crying over it. How very kind Mr. Brooke is, and how fortunate that Mr. Lawrence's business detains him near you so long, since he is so useful to you and father. The girls are all as good as gold. Joe helps me with the sewing and insists on doing all sorts of hard jobs. I should be afraid she might overdo. If I didn't know her moral fit wouldn't last long. Beth is as regular about her task as a clock and never forgets what you told her. She grieves about father and looks sober, except when she is at her little piano. Amy minds me nicely, and I take great care of her. She does her own hair, and I'm teaching her to make buttonholes and mend her stockings. She tries very hard, and I know you would be pleased with her improvement when you come. Mr. Lawrence watches over us like a motherly old hen, as Joe says, and Laurie is very kind and neighborly. He and Joe keep us merry, for we get pretty blue sometimes, and feel like orphans with you so far away. Hannah is a perfect saint. She does not scold at all, and always calls me Miss Margaret, which is quite proper, you know, and treats me with respect. We are all well and busy, but we long day and night to have you back. Give my dearest love to father, and believe me, ever your own, Meg. This note, perfectly written on scented paper, was a great contrast to the next, which was scribbled on a big sheet of thin foreign paper, ornamented with blots on all manners of flourish and curly-tailed letters. My precious Marmee, 3 cheers for dear father. Brooke was a trump to telegraph right off and let us know the minute he was better. I rushed up garret when the letter came, and tried to thank God for being so good to us, but I could only cry and say, I'm glad, I'm glad. Didn't that do as well as a regular prayer? For felt a great many in my heart. We have such funny times, and now I can enjoy them. For everyone is so desperately good. It's like living in a nest of turtle doves. You'd laugh to see Meg head the table and try to be motherish. She gets prettier every day, and I'm in love with her sometimes. The children are regular archangels, and well, I'm Joe, and never shall be anything else. Oh, I must tell you that I came near having a quarrel with Laurie. I freed my mind about a silly little thing, and he was offended. I was right, but I didn't speak as I ought, and he marched home, saying he wouldn't come again till I begged pardon. I declared I wouldn't and got mad. It lasted all day. I felt bad and wanted you very much. Laurie and I are both so proud. It's hard to beg pardon. But I thought he'd come to it, for I was in the right. He didn't come. And just at night, I remember what you said when Amy fell into the river. I read my little book, felt better, resolved not to let the sun set on my anger, and ran over to tell Laurie I was sorry. I met him at the gate, coming for the same thing. We both laughed, begged each other's pardons, and felt all good and comfortable again. I made a poem yesterday when I was helping Hannah wash, and as father likes my silly little things, I put it in to amuse him. Give him my lovingest hug that ever was, and kiss yourself a dozen times for your topsy-turvy Joe. A song from the Suds. Queen of my tub, I merrily sing, while the white foam rises high, and sturdily wash and rinse and wring, and fasten the clothes to dry. Then out in the free fresh air they swing, under the sunny sky. I wish we could wash from our hearts and souls the stains of the week away, and let water and air by their magic make ourselves as pure as they. Then on the earth there would be indeed a glorious washing day. Along the path of a useful life will heart's ease overbloom. The busy mind has no time to think of sorrow or care or gloom, and anxious thoughts may be swept away as we bravely wield a broom. I'm glad a task to me is given to labor at day by day, for it brings me health and strength and hope, and I cheerily learn to say, heard you may think, heart you may feel, but hand you shall work alway. Dear mother, there is only room for me to send my love, and some pressed pansies from the root I have been keeping safe in the house for father to see. I read every morning, try to be good all day, and sing myself to sleep with Father's tune. I can't sing Land of the Leal now. It makes me cry. Everyone is very kind, and we are as happy as we can be without you. Amy wants the rest of the page, so I must stop. I didn't forget to cover the holders. I wind the clock and air the rooms every day. Kiss dear father on the cheek, he calls mine. Oh, do come soon to your loving little Beth. Ma chérie maman, we are all well. I do my lessons always and never corroborate the girls. Meg says I'm contradict, so I put in both words and you can take the properest. Meg is a great comfort to me and lets me have jelly every night at tea, so it's good for me, Joe says, because it keeps me sweet-tempered. Laurie is not as respectful as he ought to be now. I'm almost in my teens. He calls me chick and hurts my feelings by talking French to me very fast when I say merci or bonjour as Hattie King does. The sleeves of my blue dress were all worn out and Meg put in new ones. But the full front came wrong and they are all more blue than the dress. I felt bad but did not fret. I bear my troubles well, but I do wish Hannah would put more starch in my aprons and have buckwheats every day. Can't she? Didn't I make that integration point nice? Meg says my punctuation and spelling are disgraceful, and I'm mortified, but dear me, I have so many things to do. I can't stop. Adieu, I send heaps of love to Papa. Your affectionate daughter, Amy Curtis March. Dear Miss March, I just drop a line to say we get on first rate. The girls is clever and fly around right smart. Miss Meg is going to make a proper good housekeeper. He's the liking for it, and gets the hang of things surprising quick. Joe does better, all for going ahead, but she don't stop to calculate first, and you never know where she is like to bring up. She's done out a tub of clothes on Monday, but she starched them before they was wrenched, and blew a pink calico dress till I thought I should have died a-laughing. Beth is the best of little creeters, and a sight of help to me, being so forehanded and dependable. She tries to learn everything and really goes to market beyond her years. Likewise keeps accounts with my help. Quite wonderful. We have gotten on very economical so far. I don't let the girls heave coffee only once a week, according to your wish, and keep 'em on plain wholesome victuals. Amy does well without fretting, wearing her best clothes and eating sweet stuff. Mr. Laurie is as full of doo-doos as usual and turns the house upside down frequent. But he heartens the girls, so I let him have full swing. The old gentleman sends heaps of things and is rather wearing, but means well, and it ain't my place to say nothing. My bread is riz, so no more at this time. I send my duty to Mr. March and hope he's seen the last of his pneumonia. Yours respectful, Hannah Mullet. Head nurse of Ward Number 2. All serene on the Rappahannock. Troops are in fine condition. Commissary department well conducted. The Home Guard under Colonel Teddy, always on duty. Commander-in-Chief General Lawrence reviews the Army daily. Quartermaster Mullet keeps order in camp, and Major Lyon does picket duty at night. A salute of 24 guns was fired on receipt of good news from Washington, and a dress parade took place at headquarters. Commander-in-Chief sends best wishes, in which he is heartily joined by Colonel Teddy. Dear Madam, the girls are all well. Beth and my boy report daily. Hannah is a model servant and guards pretty Meg like a dragon. Glad the fine weather holds. Pray make Brooke useful, and draw on me for funds if expenses exceed your estimate. Don't let your husband want anything. Thank God he is mending. Your serene friend and servant, James Lawrence. Chapter 17. Little Faithful. For a week, the amount of virtue in the old house would have supplied the neighborhood. It was really amazing, for everyone seemed in a heavenly frame of mind, and self-denial was all the fashion. Relieved of their first anxiety about their father, the girls insensibly relaxed their praiseworthy efforts a little, and began to fall back into old ways. They didn't forget their motto, but hoping and keeping busy seemed to grow easier. And after such tremendous exertions, they felt that endeavor deserved a holiday and gave it a good many. Joe caught a bad cold through neglect to cover the shorn head enough, and was ordered to stay at home till she was better, for Aunt March didn't like to hear people read with colds in their heads. Joe liked this, and after an energetic rummage from garret to cellar, subsided on the sofa to nurse her cold with anchorin and books. Amy found that homework and art did not go well together and returned to her mud pies. Meg went daily to her pupils and sewed, or thought she did, at home, but much time was spent in writing long letters to her mother or reading the Washington dispatches over and over. Beth kept on, with only slight relapses into idleness or grieving. All the little duties were faithfully done each day, many of her sisters also, for they were forgetful, and the house seemed like a clock whose pendulum was gone a visiting. When her heart got heavy with longings for mother, or fears for father, she went away into a certain closet, hid her face in the folds of a dear old gown, and made her little moan and prayed her little prayer quietly by herself. Nobody knew what cheered her up after a sober fit, but everyone felt how sweet and helpful Beth was, and fell into a way of going to her for comfort or advice in their small affairs. All were unconscious that this experience was a test of character, and when the first excitement was over, felt that they had done well and deserved praise, so they did. But their mistake was in ceasing to do well, and they learned this lesson through much anxiety and regret. Meg, I'd wish you'd go and see the Hummels. You know Mother told us not to forget them, said Beth, 10 days after Mrs. March's departure. I'm too tired to go this afternoon, replied Meg, rocking comfortably as she sewed. Can't you, Joe? Asked Beth. Too stormy for me with my cold. I thought it was almost well. It's well enough for me to go out with Laurie, but not well enough to go to the Hummels, said Joe, laughing, but looking a little ashamed of her inconsistency. Why don't you go yourself? Asked Meg. I've been every day, but the baby is sick and I don't know what to do for it. Mrs. Hummel goes away to work and Lottchen takes care of it, but it gets sicker and sicker, and I think you or Hannah ought to go. Beth spoke earnestly, and Meg promised she would go tomorrow. Ask Hannah for some nice little mess and take it round. Beth, the air will do you good, said Joe, adding apologetically, I'd go, but I want to finish my writing. My head aches and I'm tired, so I thought maybe some of you would go, said Beth. Amy will be in presently, and she will run down for us, suggested Meg. As Beth lay down on the sofa, the others returned to the work, and the Hummels were forgotten. An hour passed. Amy did not come. Meg went to her room to try on a new dress. Jo was absorbed in her story, and Hannah was sound asleep before the kitchen fire, when Beth quietly put on her hood, filled her basket with odds and ends for the poor children, and went out into the chilly air with a heavy head and a grieved look in her patient eyes. It was late when she came back, and no one saw her creep upstairs and shut herself into her mother's room. Half an hour later, Jo went to Mother's closet for something, and there found little Beth sitting on the medicine chest, looking very grave, with red eyes and a camphor bottle in her hand. Christopher Columbus, what's the matter? Cried Jo, as Beth put out her hand as if to warn her off, and asked quickly, You've had the scarlet fever, haven't you? Years ago, when Meg did. Why? Then I'll tell you. Oh, Jo, the baby's dead. What baby? Mrs. Hummel's. It died in my lap before she got home, cried Beth with a sob. My poor dear, how dreadful for you. I ought to have gone, said Jo, taking her sister in her arms, as she sat down in her mother's big chair with a remorseful face. It wasn't dreadful, Jo, or it only so sad. I saw in a minute it was sicker, but Lottchen said her mother had gone for a doctor, so I took the baby and let Lottie rest. It seemed asleep, but all of a sudden it gave a little cry and trembled, then lay very still. I tried to warm its feet, and Lottie gave it some milk, but it didn't stir, and I knew it was dead. Don't cry, dear. What did you do? I just sat and held it softly till Mrs. Humble came with the doctor. She said it was dead, and looked at Heinrich and Minna, who have sore throats. Scarlet fever, ma'am. Ought to have called me before, he said crossly. Mrs. Hummel told him she was poor and had tried to cure a baby herself, but now it was too late, and she could only ask him to help the others and trust to charity for his pay. He smiled then and was kinder, but it was very sad, and I cried with them until he turned around all of a sudden and told me to go home and take Belladonna right away, or I'd have the fever. No, you won't, cried Joe, hugging her close with a frightened look. Oh, Beth, if you should be sick, I would never forgive myself. What shall we do? Don't be frightened. I guess I shan't have it badly. I looked in Mother's book and saw that it begins with a headache, sore throat, and queer feelings like mine. So I did take some belladonna, and I feel better, said Beth, laying her cold hands on her hot forehead, trying to look well. If only Mother was home, exclaimed Joe, seizing the book and feeling that Washington was in an immense way off. She read the page, looked at Beth, felt her head, peeped into her throat, and then said gravely, You've been over the baby every day for more than a week, and among the others who are going to have it, so I'm afraid you're going to have it, Beth. I'll call Hannah. She knows all about sickness. Don't let Amy come. She's never had it, and I should hate to give it to her. Can't you and Meg have it over again? Asked Beth anxiously. I guess not. I don't care if I do. Served me right, selfish pig, to let you go and stay writing rubbish myself, muttered Joe as she went to consult Hannah. The good soul was wide awake in a minute and took the lead at once, assuring that there was no need to worry. Everyone had scarlet fever, and if rightly treated, nobody died. All of which Joe believed, and felt much relieved when they went up to call Meg. Now I'll tell you what we'll do, said Hannah, when she had examined and questioned Beth. We will have Dr. Banks just take a look at you, dear, and see that we start right. Then we'll send Amy off to Aunt March's for a spell to keep her out of harm's way. And one of you girls can stay at home and amuse Beth for a day or two. I'll stay, of course. I'm the oldest, began Meg, looking anxious and self-reproachful. I shall because it's my fault she's sick. I told Mother I'd do the errands, and I haven't, said Joe decidedly. Which will you have, Beth? There ain't no need of but one, said Hannah. Joe, please. And Beth leaned her head against her sister with a contented look, which effectually settled that point. I'll go and tell Amy, said Meg, feeling a little bit hurt, yet rather relieved on a whole, for she did not like nursing, and Joe did. Amy rebelled outright and passionately declared that she had rather have the fever than go to Aunt March. Meg reasoned, pleaded, and commanded, all in vain. Amy protested that she would not go, and Meg left her in despair to ask Hannah what should be done. Before she came back, Laurie walked right into the parlor to find Amy sobbing with her head in the sofa cushions. She told her story, expecting to be consoled, but Laurie only put his hands in his pockets and walked about the room, whistling softly as he knit his brows in deep thought. Presently he sat down beside her and said in his most wheedlesome tone, Now be a sensible little woman and do as they say. No, don't cry, but hear what a jolly plan I've got. You go to Aunt March's, and I'll come and take you out every day, driving or walking, and we'll have capital times. Won't that be better than moping here? I don't wish to be sent off as if I was in the way, began Amy in an injured voice. Bless your heart, child. It's to keep you well. You don't want to be sick, do you? No, I'm sure I don't. But I dare say I shall be, for I've been with Beth all the time. That's the very reason you ought to go away at once, so that you may escape it. Change of air and care will keep you well, I dare say. Or, if it does not entirely, you will have the fever more lightly, and I advise you to be off as soon as you can, for scarlet fever is no joke, miss. Excuse me. But it's dull at Aunt March's, and she's so cross, said Amy, looking rather frightened. It won't be dull with me popping in every day to tell you how Beth is, and to take you out gallivanting. The old lady likes me, and I'll be as sweet as possible to her, so she won't peck at us, whatever we do. Will you take me out in the trotting wagon with Puck? On my honor as a gentleman. And come every single day? See if I don't. Then and bring me back the minute, Beth, as well. The identical minute. And go to the theater? Truly? A dozen theaters, if we may. Well, I guess I will, said Amy slowly. Good girl. Call Meg and tell her you'll give in, said Laurie, with an approving pat, which annoyed Amy more than the giving in. Meg and Joe came running down to behold the miracle which had been wrought, and Amy, feeling very precious and self-sacrificing, promised to go, if the doctor said Beth was going to be ill. How is the little dear? Asked Laurie, for Beth was his especial pet, and he felt more anxious about her than he liked to show. She's lying down on Mother's bed and feels better. The baby's death troubled her, but I dare say she has only got a cold. Hannah says she thinks so, but she looks worried, and that makes me fidgety, answered Meg. What a trying world it is, said Joe, rumpling up her hair in a fretful way. No sooner do we get out of one trouble than down comes another. There doesn't seem to be anything to hold on to when Mother's gone. So I'm all at sea. Well, don't make a porcupine of yourself. It isn't becoming. Settle your wig, Joe, and tell me if I shall telegraph to your mother or do anything, asked Laurie, who had never been reconciled to the loss of his one friend's beauty. That is what troubles me, said Meg. I think we ought to tell her if Beth is really ill. But Hannah says we mustn't, for Mother can't leave Father, but it would only make them anxious. Beth won't be sick long, and Hannah knows just what to do. And Mother said we were to mind her, so I suppose we must. But it doesn't seem quite right to me. Well, I can't say. Suppose you ask Grandfather after the doctor has been. We will. Joe, go and get Dr. Bangs at once, commanded Meg. We can't decide anything till he's been. Stay where you are, Joe. I'm an errand boy to this establishment, said Laurie, taking up his cap. I'm afraid you're busy, began Meg. No, I'm done my lessons for the day. Do you study in vacation time? Asked Joe. I follow the good example my neighbors set me, was Laurie's answer as he swung himself out of the room. I have great hopes for my boy, observed Joe, watching him fly over the fence with an approving smile. He does very well for a boy, was Meg's somewhat ungracious answer, for the subject did not interest her. Dr. Banks came and said Beth had symptoms of the fever, but he thought she would have it lightly, though he looked sober over the Hummel story. Amy was ordered off at once and provided with something to ward off danger. She departed in a great state, with Joe and Laurie as escort. Aunt March received them with her usual hospitality. What do you want now? She asked, looking sharply over her spectacles, while the parrot, sitting on the back of her chair, called out, Go away! No boys allowed here! Laurie retired to the window, and Joe told her story. No more than I expected. If you're allowed to go poking about among poor folks, Amy can stay and make herself useful if she isn't sick, which I've no doubt she will be. Looks like it now. Don't cry, child. It worries me to hear people sniff. Amy was on the point of crying, but Laurie slyly pulled the parrot's tail, which caused Polly to utter an astonished croak and call out, Bless my boots! In such a funny way that she laughed instead. What do you hear from your mother? Asked the old lady gruffly. Father is much better, replied Joe, trying to keep sober. Oh, is he? Well, that won't last long, I fancy. March never had any stamina, was the cheerful reply. Ha, ha, never say die. Take a pinch of snuff. Goodbye, goodbye, squawked Polly, dancing on her perch, clawing at the old lady's cap as Laurie tweaked him in the rear. Hold your tongue, you disrespectful old bird. And Joe, you'd better go at once. It isn't proper to be gadding about so late with a rattle-pated boy like. Hold your tongue, you disrespectful old bird, cried Polly, tumbling off the chair with a bounce and running to peck the rattle-pated boy who was shaking with laughter at the last speech. I don't think I can bear it, but I'll try, thought Amy, as she was left alone with Aunt March. Get along, you fright! Screamed Polly, and that rude speech, Amy could not restrain a sniff. Chapter 18, Dark Days. Beth did have the fever and was much sicker than anyone but Hannah and the doctor suspected. The girls knew nothing about illness, and Mr. Lawrence was not allowed to see her, so Hannah had everything her own way. And busy, Mr. Bangs did his best, but left a good deal to the excellent nurse. Meg stayed at home, lest she should infect the kings, and kept house, feeling very anxious and a little guilty when she wrote letters in which no mention was made of Beth's illness. She could not think she could not think it right to deceive her mother, but she had been bidden to mind Hannah, and Hannah wouldn't hear of Mrs. March being told and worried just for such a trifle. Jo devoted herself to Beth day and night, and not a hard task for Beth was very patient, and bore her pain uncomplainingly as long as she could control herself. But there came a time when during the fever fits she began to talk in a hoarse, broken voice, to play on the coverlet as if on her beloved little piano, and try to sing with a throat so swollen that there was no music left, and a time when she did not know the familiar faces around her, but addressed them by wrong names, and called imploringly for her mother. Then Jo grew frightened. Meg begged to be allowed to write the truth. Even Hannah said she would think of it, though there was no danger yet. A letter from Washington added to the trouble, for Mr. March had had a relapse, and could not think of coming home for a long while. How dark the days seemed now, how sad and lonely the house, and how heavy were the hearts of the sisters as they worked and waited, while the shadow of death hovered over the once happy home. Then it was Margaret, sitting alone with tears dropping often in her work, felt how rich she had been in things more precious than any luxuries money could buy, in love, protection, peace, and health, and the blessings of life. Then it was that Jo, living in the darkened room with that suffering little sister always before her eyes, and that pathetic voice sounding in her ears, learned to see the beauty of the sweetness of Beth's nature, to feel how deep and tender a place she filled in all hearts, and to acknowledge the worth of Beth's unselfish ambition to live for others, and to make home happy by the exercise of those simple virtues which all may possess, and which all should love and value more than talent, wealth, or beauty. And Amy, in her exile, longed eagerly to be at home, for that she might work for Beth, feeling now that no service would be hard or irksome, and remembering with regretful grief how many neglected tasks those willing hands had done for her. Laurie haunted the house like a restless ghost, and Mr. Lawrence locked the grand piano because he could not bear to be reminded of the young neighbor who used to make the twilight pleasant for him. Everyone missed Beth. The milkman, the baker, the grocer, and the butcher inquired how she did. Poor Mrs. Hummel came to beg pardon for her thoughtlessness and to get a shroud for Mina. The neighbors sent all sorts of comforts and good wishes, and even those who knew her best were surprised to find how many friends shy little Beth had made. Meanwhile, she lay on her bed with old Joanna at her side, for even in her wanderings she did not forget her forlorn protege. She longed for her cats, but would not have brought them lest they should get sick, and in her quiet hours she was full of anxiety about Jo. She sent loving messages to Amy, bade them tell her mother that she would write soon, and often begged for pencil and paper to try to say a word that father might not think she had neglected him. But soon even those intervals of consciousness ended, and she lay hour after hour, tossing to and fro, with incoherent words on her lips, or sank into a heavy sleep, which brought her no refreshment. Dr. Banks came twice a day. Hannah sat up at night. Meg kept a telegram in her desk all ready to send off at any minute, and Jo never stirred from Beth's side. The 1st of December was a wintry day, indeed, to them, for a bitter wind blew, snow fell fast, and the year seemed getting ready for its death. When Dr. Banks came that morning, he looked long at Beth, held the hot hand in both his own for a minute, and laid it gently down, saying in a low voice to Hannah, "If Mrs. March can leave her husband, she'd better be sent for." Hannah nodded without speaking, for her lips twitched nervously. Meg dropped down into a chair as the strength seemed to go out of her limbs at the sound of those words, and Jo, standing with a pale face for a minute, ran to the parlor, snatched up the telegram, throwing on her things, rushed out into the storm. She was soon back, and while noiselessly taking off her cloak, Laurie came in with a letter saying that Mr. March was mending again. Joe read it thankfully, but the heavy weight did not seem lifted off her heart, and her face was so full of misery that Laurie asked, "What is it? Is Beth worse?" "I've sent for Mother," said Joe, tugging at her rubber boots with tragic expression. "Good for you, Joe. Did you do it on your own responsibility?" asked Laurie, as he seated her in the hall chair and took off the rebellious boots, seeing how her hands shook. "No, the doctor told us to." "Oh, Joe, it's not so bad as that," cried Laurie with a startled face. "Yes, it is. She doesn't know us. She doesn't even talk about the flocks of green doves, as she calls the vine leaves on the wall. She doesn't look like my Beth, and there's nobody to help us bear it. Mother and Father are both gone, and God seems so far away. I can't find him." As the tears streamed down fast down poor Joe's cheeks, she stretched out her hand in a helpless sort of way, as if groping in the dark, and Laurie took it in his, whispering as well as he could with a lump in his throat, "I'm here. Hold on to me, Joe, dear." She could not speak, but she did hold on, and the warm grasp of the friendly human hand comforted her sore heart and seemed to lead her nearer to the divine arm which alone could uphold her in her trouble. Laurie longed to say something tender and comfortable, but no fitting words came to him. So he stood silent, gently stroking her bent head, as her mother used to do. It was the best thing he could have done, far more soothing than the most eloquent words, for Joe felt the unspoken sympathy, and in the silence learned the sweet solace which affection administers to sorrow. Soon she dried the tears which had relieved her, and looked up with a grateful face. "Thank you, Teddy. I'm better now. I don't feel so forlorn, and will try to bear it if it comes. Keep hoping for the best. That will help you, Joe. So soon your mother will be here, and then everything will be all right. I'm so glad Father is better. Now she won't feel so bad about leaving him. Oh, me, it does seem as if all troubles come in a heap, and I've got the heaviest part on my shoulders," sighed Joe, spreading her wet handkerchief over her knees to dry. "Doesn't Meg pull fair?" asked Laurie, looking indignant. "Oh, yes, she tries to, but she can't love Bethy as I do, and she won't miss her as I shall. Beth is my conscience, and I can't give her up. I can't. I can't." Down went Joe's face into the wet handkerchief, as she never cried despairingly, for she had kept up bravely until now and never shed a tear. Laurie drew his hands over his eyes, but could not speak till he had subdued the choky feeling in his throat and steadied his lips. It might be unmanly, but he couldn't help it, and I'm glad of it. Presently, as Joe's sobs quieted, he said hopefully, "I don't think she'll die. She's so good, and we all love her so much. I don't believe God will take her away yet." "The good and dear people always do die," groaned Joe. But she stopped crying, for her friend's words cheered her up in spite of her own doubts and fears. "Poor girl, you're all worn out. It isn't like you to be forlorn. Stop a bit. I'll hearten you up in a jiffy." Laurie went off 2 stairs at a time, and Joe laid her wearied head down on Beth's little brown hood, which no one had thought of moving from the table where she left it. It must have possessed some magic, for the submissive spirit of its gentle owner seemed to enter into Joe, and when Laurie came running down with a glass of wine, she took it with a smile and said bravely, "I drink health to my Beth. You are a good doctor, Teddy, and such a comfortable friend. How can I ever pay you?" she added, as the wine refreshed her body, and as the kind words had done her troubled mind. "I'll send my bill by and by, and tonight I'll give you something that will warm the cockles of your heart better than quarts of wine," said Laurie, beaming at her with a face of suppressed satisfaction at something. "What is it?" cried Joe, forgetting her woes for a moment in her wonder. "I telegraphed to your mother yesterday, and Brooke answered she'd come at once, and she'll be here tonight, and everything will be all right. Aren't you glad I did it?" Laurie spoke very fast, and turned red and excited all in 1 minute, for he had kept his plot a secret, for fear of disappointing the girls or harming Beth. Joe grew quite white. flew out of her chair, and the moment he stopped speaking, she electrified him by throwing her arms around his neck, and crying out with a joyful cry, "Oh, Laurie! Oh, mother! I'm so glad!" She did not weep again, but she laughed hysterically, and trembled, clung to her friend, as if she was a little bewildered by the sudden news. Laurie, though decidedly amazed, behaved with great presence of mind. He patted her back soothingly, and finding that she was recovering, followed it up by a bashful kiss or two, which brought Joe round at once. Holding onto the banister, she put him gently away, saying breathlessly, "Oh, don't! I didn't mean to. It was dreadful of me, but you're such a dear to go and do it all in spite of Hannah that I could help flying at you. Tell me all about it, and don't give me one again. It makes me act so." "I don't mind," laughed Laurie, as he settled his tie. "Why, you see, I got fidgety, and so did Grandpa. We thought Hannah was overdoing the authority business, and your mother ought to know. She'd never forgive us if well, if anything happened, you know. So I got Grandpa to say it was high time we did something, and off I pelted to the office yesterday. For the doctor looks over, and Hannah must took my head off when I proposed a telegram. I can never bear to be lorded over, so that settled my mind, and I did it. Your mother will come, I know, and the late train is in at 2 a.m. I shall go for her. You've only got to bottle up your rapture and keep Beth quiet till that blessed lady gets here." "Laurie, you're an angel. How shall I ever thank you?" "Fly at me again. I rather liked it," said Laurie, looking mischievous, a thing he had not done for a fortnight. "No, I thank you. I will do it by proxy. When your grandpa comes, don't tease, but go home and rest, for you'll be up half the night. Bless you, Teddy. Bless you." Joe backed into a corner, and as she finished her speech, she vanished precipitately into the kitchen, where she sat down upon a dresser and told the assembled cats that she was happy, oh so happy. Well, that's it, guys. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this episode, and have a great week.